Ring the dial, turn it loud. Miami's pride, make us proud. CanesWear crew, you hear the crowd. Hurricanes ain't backing down. Every play, every score. Raising bets and raising roar. Rocking orange, green galore. All for one and one for four. We got FTSN, taking names, winning again. Podcast fam, till the end. Tune in, now let's begin.
Canes fans, what is going on? This is another episode of the CanesWear Daily Podcast, only on the FTSN Network. Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button. And our guest today needs no introduction, one of the best in the game when it's talking about covering this Miami Hurricane football team. We had our guy, Malik Rozier, former quarterback, yesterday on. Make sure you guys watch that. But today, I want to get one of the GOATs in the media, our guy, Alex Donno, who does a great job covering Miami Hurricanes football. And he just had on a legendary former Hurricane, Clinton Portis, on his show recently. I want to be able to chop it up about that conversation with our guy, Clinton Portis, and also talk about, from a media perspective, where Alex sees this team going, if it's going in the right direction, or if this could be the time to hit the panic button. But Alex, what is going on today, brother?
Hey, Brad, thank you so much for having me. You do a great job, and it's an honor to follow Malik by a day. I'm a big fan of Malik Rozier and the way that he breaks down everything going on with this team. And so thank you so much for having me.
Of course, man. Anytime, man. You're one of the hardest workers in the game, and you do great stuff. You know, right off the bat, obviously, you have the opportunity and privilege each and every week, for the most part, to be able to ask questions and communicate with these coaches and players. And obviously, you know, kind of a sore subject. Don't want to get overwhelmed with, you know, the Georgia Tech loss that everyone is starting to hit the panic button about. But, you know, is this, from a media side, do you feel like this was kind of a good thing for this football team going into these last 2 weeks of the season, knowing that the history of this program, you know, me and Malik talked about it yesterday, back in 2017, his team as well was undefeated. Last 2-3 games of the year, they ended off with 3 losses in a row. And, you know, kind of the hype season that they had ended up replenishing after those 3 losses. And now this team is kind of in a similar boat. It's kind of destiny on Miami. They can right the ship of how they want the season to go. We got our first loss. But do you think that getting this loss now helps this team to where maybe instead of getting the loss at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, it has to be an opportunity for them to recalibrate. And Miami is a little lucky from a couple of different standpoints. I think having a loss like this happen right before a bye week, I think it's fortunate timing. You know, it's never good to lose a game when you're 9-0, but to have this happen right before a bye week is now they have extra time to reflect and kind of tinker with some things before they get full on into Wake Forest mode. That's the luxury you have when you have an extra week. And then let's not kid ourselves. Miami also got very fortunate with, you know, the way that other games are playing out around the ACC, because, you know, right when Miami lost to Georgia Tech, at that moment, they lost control of their own destiny. Like, you could not say in that moment that, hey, if Miami wins out, they're in the ACC championship and in the college football playoff. They lost that. And then several hours later, control of their destiny was given right back to them with Pittsburgh losing. So in a sense, you can say the stakes are kind of the same, that Miami's in the same situation coming out after a loss than they were heading into that Georgia Tech game. It's not exactly that way, because unfortunately losing a game, it takes away your margin for error completely. If you lose another game, you're probably not in the ACC championship game unless a bunch of other fortunate, you know, things happen. SMU's got to lose probably twice or once, and Clemson's got to lose again. So you would need a lot of help there. So this gives Miami an opportunity to recalibrate. Now, on the other side of that argument, Brad, and I hear this a lot because Miami fans, we tend to, and I'll say we, just to be collective with everyone out there, right? With all the Canes fans, we tend to hit the panic button after one thing doesn't go right. Like there aren't a lot of undefeated teams left, right? I mean, you've got Oregon, you've got Indiana, you've got Army. Like there's not a lot of unbeatens left, and like for most teams, you lose a game, it's like, hey, everything's still in front of us. Let's bounce back. For Miami fans, you lose a game, and it's like, everything's terrible. We need to fire everybody. This is. I even saw somebody on X who was like, "Are you sure we shouldn't be playing Emory Williams at quarterback?" And I'm like, what world am I living in? Like, I can't. Sometimes I can't tell if people are just trolling or if they're for real about this stuff. So what's disturbing about the Georgia Tech loss was the pattern defensively, because it's not as if Miami just had one bad defensive game. The defense has been exposed in a lot of the wins that they've had. So there is concern there. I don't think you're going to be able to turn Miami's defense from what they are into a top 5 defense the rest of the way. That's not happening. But with that said, I think that this now, actually taking that loss and understanding there are consequences for failing on defense, because previously you failed on defense, Cam Ward still bails you out and Xavier Restrepo bails you out and so on. It didn't happen this time around. So yeah, I mean, Lance Guidry can't just wave some magic wand at this and, turn it into the 85 Bears defense or something like that, or the 2001 Hurricanes defense, if you'd like a more relevant example. But I do think that there are, maybe some ways that they can scheme up better opportunities to set the edge. And if there are players who are, violating their coaching techniques, it needs to be explained to them. No more freelancing whatsoever. I also think Miami's offense, they weren't, to me, the primary reason why you lost that game, but they definitely left some plays on the field. I mean, Cam Ward was very good, but he was far from perfect. I thought he held on to the football a little too long, didn't look for his checkdowns enough. I thought that Saturday against Georgia Tech was the worst game for Mario Cristobal this year and the worst game for Shannon Dawson. I think, going forward on 4th down is a Cristobal decision. You left 6 points off the board by not kicking field goals. I talked about this earlier today with Gio Milian. We had a discussion about that. And so, the offense left a lot of meat on the bone, but I'm confident the offense can bounce back, because what happened this past Saturday was not characteristic of that offense. And, credit to Georgia Tech, but Miami also, a lot of that was self-inflicted by Miami just missing some plays and leaving some stuff out there on the field. So I'm confident the offense can bounce back. I think the defense can at least make enough tweaks to play more complementary football, because I think, Brad, we've all realized that Miami is a team where, you can win some big games with Miami's offense, and you're going to have to just outscore a lot of teams. That's your identity. But it doesn't mean, and in college football, it's all about offense these days, man. You've got the personnel Miami has up front with the offensive line. Cam Ward is the best quarterback in college football. Miami's got one of the best receiving cores in college football, one of the best running back rooms in college football. You've got a tight end room that I don't think is being used enough. I think that's something that they need to put an emphasis on before the next game. So I think this team can bounce back. Are they a team that's going to win a national championship? Probably not, but I think they can win an ACC championship, and I think they can get into that college football playoff.
A lot of excellent points, Alex, that you just made. And one of the things that I think gets overlooked by this fan base when you do watch Miami each and every week, right? To your point, you kind of see what this team is made up to be, right? The offense is going to carry this team, and it's going to get down to crunch time, whether it's the last quarter of the football game, the last 2 minutes of a football game, that you're going to see that this defense is going to put you behind at certain situations. But when it comes to crunch time, will they make this necessarily stops to keep your offense to win that football game, right? And as bad as our defense has been playing in recent weeks and how bad they played this past week against Georgia Tech, I do still believe that, the whole quote of Lance Guidry, it is what it is. That's not only with the defense, but I also think that quote can be for who this football team is from a dynamic standpoint. That our offense is going to be the one that is going to win the game, but our defense is going to be the one that keeps us to where we get the opportunity late in the game, right? It is what it is. And I think what I want to ask you is, you being in media, when you first heard Lance Guidry say that quote, it is what it is, What was your first thoughts on that quote? Because I know a lot of fans kind of take that a different way and a different approach. What was your thoughts on that quote? And then also using that quote to how you see this defense and this overall team going forward.
I think it's very much what you said. I think that Guidry, in a way, was kind of without going so football deep in giving an explanation that would be difficult for a lot of fans to understand, and then maybe also give away. Part of it was I think Guidry was protecting his players a little bit. Like I don't think he wants to throw any specific players under the bus. Now we've clearly seen certain players that have been struggling this year. I don't think Guidry wants to put his individuals in a very bad situation, because I think part of the reality is that there are certain issues that are probably not fixable at this point in the season. That's the way that I took it. I can always understand why fans are going to be upset to hear something like that, because when you hear a defensive coordinator say more than once, about your struggles, it is what it is. That then tells people, well, does that mean you don't think you need to do anything to fix this? That we're just going to keep doing the same thing? The old definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I think there probably is a little bit too much of that. I mean, I think that maybe there are some personnel changes that you can make, not only with formations, but with, maybe giving other players opportunities to get on the field a little bit more at linebacker and in the defensive backfield. I think there's probably some things you can do. I think that down the stretch, there are, players that have been injured that maybe can help you. Elijah Alston could probably return after the bye week. They've missed him on the defensive line. They've obviously missed Amari Brown in the defensive backfield, who could be ready to come back soon. So I think the it is what it is thing. I get it why it's frustrating to fans. I think it's easy to kind of read into stuff or take it the wrong way. I think I understood what his vibe was there, that, when you've got like a player like Kiko that gets stuck in coverage and you take advantage of that mismatch, that it is what it is. I think I understood what he was going for there, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, I think maybe what fans want, and I remember that they wanted this from Josh Gaddis a couple years ago. Now Guidry is way better with the media than Gaddis was, so I'm not trying to compare them, but I think the fan base just wants more accountability. Like I think they would much rather Lance Guidry come out and say, like, man, guys, we were bad again on defense, and I'm failing, and that, like, I think they want something like that, but you're probably not going to get that.
And I also think one of the things that kind of scratch fans' heads at times when they're watching this defense compared to last year, right, is there were a lot of glaring opportunities and players that were just injured, or we just didn't have the amount of bodies last year to really compete and feel like we could rely on our defense, right? But yeah, our defense was still somewhat productive. And when you look at guys like Kiko Manoa, who seemed to be a completely different player last year, right? And then when you look at some of the other players that are kind of missing the opportunities currently this year from last year, people were, as great as James Williams and Cam Kitchens were, people were still complaining that they were too risky, right? Yeah. And they almost wanted them out of the program to where they can now see these newer guys be able to develop from the ground up and see what type of development is coming with it. And now you're starting to see that maybe the grass wasn't so greener the grass was greener on the other side, right? And I think, to my point, is the other thing that I think gets overlooked on this defense right now is the most underperformed position group on this team has to be the defensive line, not only because of last year only having a healthy Ruben Bain, right, as a true freshman, be really the only guy that make an impact with the defensive line. And we were still getting pressures. We were still getting sacks. And some of the other guys that you had around Ruben Bain were either injured or guys that really had no production, but we were still able to produce something. And I think the biggest thing with this year is we brought in lots of production, whether it's Tyler Barron, Simeon Barrow, Elijah Alston, Akeem Mesidor coming back off an injury, Marley Cook, CJ Clark. You have about 6 guys straight from the transfer portal this past year that you are hoping to make instant impacts for this defensive line. And unfortunately, it seems like we're still not getting to the quarterback as much. And when you look at it from a stat standpoint and just, eye point of view watching, it seems like we were actually better on defensive line last year compared to this year so far with a lot less production. What's your thoughts on that overall, and kind of where you see this going, not only the rest of the season, but possibly next year when we lose 5 or 6 of these guys?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your assessment there. And you think about last season also, Kiko was such an effective pass rusher last year. He was actually the co-leader in sacks with 7.5 last season, along with Ruben Bain. With Bain, he dealt with a long injury absence. Hasn't quite looked like the same guy that he was last year so far. There seems like there's been a pretty big regression in recent weeks for Tyler Barron, who doesn't look like he did earlier on in the year. There's been a surprising lack of production from the linebackers, and a lot of that is just on like Kiko. Kiko's having a puzzling year, unfortunately. I like him a lot. So, and then what you were saying about the safeties. I think now we realize how much we miss James and Cam, and they both left a year early, and they weren't exactly hot draft commodities. So if you wish that they could have come back for one more season, man, I think this defense could be a lot different, because Guidry, the safeties are really the center of his defense. I mean, he's a safeties coach by trade, and unfortunately, with the safety play having been pretty poor overall this year, it hurts the entire defense. You said something, it might have been off air, you said to me, and I agree that maybe people are being a little bit too hard on Lance Guidry right now. And like part of it, and where I agree with you, and I want to give him some benefit of the doubt, is I find it hard to believe that he suddenly just can't coach anymore. Like, I find that hard to believe, where Miami's defense, I thought, overachieved last year, given the personnel. He was at Marshall prior to that, and they had an awesome year. You remember what Marshall did defensively against Notre Dame 2 years ago? He was the defensive coordinator there. It's like, at some point, he's built a certain amount of equity where you have to look at what other factors are at play, because I see people online are like, oh, why is the DC such an idiot? He's terrible. He can't coach. He could coach last year. He could coach his butt off the year before that. He had surprisingly good defenses at Western Kentucky, where the Hilltoppers were overachieving. So, I'm not saying none of the blame is in his lap, but you've got to wonder what other factors are at play there. You're asking me about the defensive line long term. I still feel good about the long term aspect of the D line. I know you're gonna lose some guys who came in just for 1 year, like Simeon Barrow and Tyler Barron, and I think Mesidor is this his last year of eligibility. So yeah, so you're obviously going to lose some of the elder statesmen on that D line, but you're going to have Ruben Bain back next year. You're going to have Justin Scott heading into his second year, ready to be a big time contributor. Marquise Lightfoot, who is he's a natural stud. He's putting on more weight. He's kind of getting his body more conditioned to the college level. Cole McConaughey, I think, is going to be a weapon in the present and future. So you've get Armando Blunt as well in the future is going to be a big weapon. So it's going to be a much younger D-line next year. And I think that they're going to have to lean a lot on Ruben Bain, he's already one of the leaders of the team as a true sophomore. And I know like he's having a little bit of a down stretch over, but he's still one of the best, most capable, not only pass rushers, but a guy who's big enough to move into the interior, like one of the better defensive linemen in the entire country. So I think they're going to have to lean a lot on him. And, in future recruiting classes, I mean, Miami just landed Hayden Lowe. They flipped him last night from USC. And, again, you don't want to count on like true freshmen to be all Americans. Ruben Bain, though, he had that kind of an impact last year. But I think Hayden Lowe, to me, looks like the type of player who can be an impact guy. Like, he seems to have a college-ready frame and build already. I'm also excited about Herbert Scroggins, who led the entire state of Georgia in sacks this year. So, last year, Jason Taylor, Joe Salavea, Mario Cristobal had the top defensive line class in the country for the class of 2024. They're working some magic now for the class of 2025 as well. So I feel pretty good about the future of that D line. They're going to be younger though next year.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Hayden Lowe. We might as well get right into some of these recruits that are still on the wish list. I mean, we got 19 days left until early signing day is finished, and We're in November, and as y'all know, Miami fans, December is right around the corner, which means it's not only Christmas time, it's Grinchmas time. It's time to get the loafers out, the spatulas out, time to flip some things. And to your point, we just flipped Hayden Lowe, a former USC commit, 6'4", 245 pounds, a guy that could play inside at times, but he's definitely going to be more of an outside pass rusher. It definitely also helps that he's coming from, I believe it's Oaks Christian, where another guy by the name of Kayvon Thibodeau, who Mario Cristobal also recruited and developed, and you see what he's doing not only in the NFL, but what he got to do over at Oregon. And this is a guy that's coming from the same high school as Kayvon, and this could be a perfect opportunity for, Mario and the staff to kind of lay out the same blueprint that they did for Kayvon to do the same thing with Hayden. Besides Hayden Lowe, though, there's a lot of interesting names out there. Like I mentioned before, we got about 19 days left till early signing day, but there's a lot of interesting names, whether it's on the offense or defense side of the ball, that Miami is still looking to flip. You got, guys that are committed to Florida, guys that are committed to other programs. Give me 2 or 3 names that intrigue you the most, to where not necessarily a wish list, but more of a reality, because I do think that some of these names that fans are hoping we land, in a reality sense, it's probably not going to happen. I think a guy like Jamie French is one name that I think, from a realistic standpoint, we're probably not going to land that young man. But who are 2 or 3 names that you're intrigued by, that you're hoping Mario and the staff get the spatula out and flip in the next 19 days?
Couple of defensive backs. There's been some players that have recently kind of come off our wish list. Like I saw earlier on Thursday that Shamar Arno, who did flip, but he flipped from USC to Auburn. Hugh Freeze, no matter how bad their team is, he continues to find a way to work that magic behind the scenes. I won't take people too far behind the curtain on that one, but you can use your imagination on how that works with him. But Ben Hanks is one that I've really had my eyes on. South Florida kid, but he's torn because his father was a Gators legend, Ben Hanks Sr. So Junior is a Gators legacy, but you follow the visits. He's been around Miami a lot. And it's not just because of the geography. Of course, him being a South Florida kid, it's easier to get to Miami games than Gainesville, but he hasn't shown the Gators as much love with the visits as I think they were hoping for. And there's just, I know that there's been a lot of positive relationship building with Ben Hanks, and Miami really understands the urgency of recruiting the best possible DB class. I think they already have a very good DB class, but they really want to make it great. Like, they want the DB class to be kind of what the D-line class was last year and what the O-line class was the year before that. So Hanks is a big one that I look at. And, DJ Pickett keeps, I don't know if he's playing with our emotions or what he's doing, but I keep seeing now on Thursday, he keeps posting these Miami edits and Miami videos on his social media. I don't know if LSU instructed him to do some trolling today or what, but he's obviously got the family ties with his cousin playing here. His younger cousin, Cannon Pickett, who's a 2026 offensive lineman, really likes Miami. His uncle, Booker Pickett Sr., played here. I know Miami's really made the whole Pickett family feel like family. So hopefully Miami can pull off that flip as well, And again, like every time I'm not so sure how confident I am in the Pickett thing. We get some hopium and all these social media posts. So it still makes me wonder, like you said, I'm not, I don't think there's still contact with Jamie French. From what I understand, it doesn't seem like there's, much of anything going on with Solomon Thomas, who's committed to Florida State. It seems like Florida State is losing all their other commits, but maybe that's a guy that they hold on to. And Dallas Wilson, I've kind of wondered about, but then I heard he's visiting Florida this weekend, but maybe that just means he's still open to something other than Oregon. I'm intrigued by the Oregon thing, Brad, because I wonder what's going to happen there with Dan Lanning, because he's starting to get talked about for possible NFL jobs. Now, this could just be one of those things. I assume he's represented by Jimmy Sexton, who represents most of the big-time college coaches, where you try when your client's doing well. Oregon's the number 1 team in the country right now. They may end up winning a national championship this year. His stock is very hot. Maybe you try to get him another raise from Oregon this offseason. I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, or if he legitimately up in the NFL. I mean, Lanning is only like 38, 39 years old, so he's really young on the coaching scene right now. So he's got some time. Like if he wants to stick around in South Bend for a little longer, he doesn't necessarily have to do the NFL thing right now, but he may want to strike while the iron is hot. And if he does that, an Oregon recruit, commit like Dallas Wilson or anyone else, because Mario does have relationships with those West Coast high schools still, as evidenced by flipping Hayden Lowe and some of the other players he's landed. So those are some guys that I'm intrigued about. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. Is there anyone else you want to add into the list?
I think the only other guy I could see right now that could possibly be a Miami Hurricane very soon is probably TJ Alford out of Vero Beach.
Yes,
the linebacker. He's been committed to Ohio State for quite a while now, but it has not been Miami has not been shy about making sure that he seems like a very high priority. I know he enjoyed his time at Miami a few weeks ago when he came for a home game, got to talk to one of his high school coaches as well. And he loves the environment. He loves the love, not only from the fan base, but the continuous amount of love that the coaching staff, I think one of the biggest things that people need to realize is that consistency and honesty is two of the biggest things when it comes to recruiting, and you can't fake those things. And regardless if a commit is committed to another class, guys like Mario and the staff are never going to stop. I mean, you saw how crazy the Jeremiah Smith sweepstakes were just last season, right? He was committed to Ohio State forever, and it seemed like the closer it got to signing day, it was never really Miami, right? It was Ohio State or Florida State. But people like me and you and others that, kind of know more behind the scenes, Miami was always there from the beginning. It was just they were playing their cards very close to them and kind of waited till the last day where you saw Coach Rod Mack, start to tweet out in love. And then some of these other players on the team and recruits like Chris Ewald as well, trying to help recruit. So, I would kind of, the way we saw the Jeremiah Smith thing end up last year, I could kind of see something like that similar to maybe a guy like DJ Pickett this class. It's just a matter if it goes our way or if it doesn't. I think one thing that does help currently is the way we are playing on the football field. If we continue to win, get to that ACC championship and get the monkey off of our back and finally get that first one, I think that is really going to help with some of the momentum of some of these guys. And to your point, I mean, you can never count out Mario and the staff. They're going to keep recruiting to the last minute. So I wouldn't hold your breath and kind of say, hey, all these guys are 100% going elsewhere. But DJ Pickett, TJ Alford, those are two guys that I'm looking for in particular of how it ends up shaping up. But I will say this. I think from a recruiting standpoint, you gotta see where we are compared to not only around the nation, but your in-state rivals, right? You mentioned Florida State, and it seems like they might as well just pick up homeless guys on the street to get in this recruiting class because nobody wants to join this staff. And then, of course, Florida, on the other hand, is getting Florida State scraps or kind of getting everybody on a yellow school bus and saying, hey, man, we got free money. Just come over to Florida for the weekend and watch us lose to LSU. And I think either way, I don't think neither one of those schools are playing the recruiting game like Miami, and I think it's only going to benefit us more than those two schools. I mean, we have a staff and a head coach that knows what they're doing when it comes to a recruiting aspect compared to those two other schools. So I'm not really too worried about where we are currently. I think as long as we take care of business these next couple of weeks, you're going to see a few more flips for Miami, and I think this class will probably end up shaping to be a top 7, top 5 class at best. And I think that's just another great thing that you're going to need to continue to build on this roster. Before I let you go, Alex, any last concerns or things that you're wanting this team to look into building off of this first loss of the season going into this bye before we have our last 2 games of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I take what's given to you, whether it be the opportunity to kick a field goal. Sometimes I know going for every 4th down can be tempting when you've got, the number 1 offense in the country. But I thought, situationally, Miami left some points off the board. I would never tell Cam Ward to change his play style because the gunslinger thing has worked for him. So I'm not saying you have to have like a 2-second release every time out because, buying time in the pocket sometimes leads to his biggest plays. But, maybe just sometimes think about taking the check down. And I say that with love. Like, again, like I'm not like, I'm not trying to be critical of Ward. I still think he's the best quarterback in the country. And, if anyone wants to blame him for losing last week, you remember we would not be anywhere near 9-1 without the plays that Ward made throughout the season. So don't forget about that. Offensively there, I'm constructive of the offense because I think that they can easily bounce back. Like I think what we saw this past Saturday was not characteristic. 3 for 10 on third down was not characteristic of this offense. I have faith that they can flip a switch and get back to their previous form. With the defense, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher, but I want to throw in some perspective as well from a recruiting standpoint, because I like the fact that the players Miami's recruiting, especially, seeing the comments that Hayden Lowe made yesterday and comments from other players who are committed, who are thinking about Miami, they see the big picture, right? I know to some of us, like, you lose a game that you're supposed to win against Georgia Tech. Like, I had people asking me, is Miami going to lose recruits now because of this? And it's like, the recruits still see a 9-1 football team, and they see a team that has improved their trajectory. And I try to have that same perspective, right? I can acknowledge that there were a lot of things that went wrong in that Georgia Tech game and some of Miami's previous games that were wins, but I'm also not going to pretend this program isn't making progress. I mean, from 5 wins to 7 wins to 9+ wins and an opportunity at an ACC championship and a college football playoff. The recruits see that. Like, I didn't hear from any recruit who was like, oh yeah, you know what? Miami was so bad against Georgia Tech. They're off my list. I'm not. No, they still see Miami the same way, as a program that's winning now and is also on the rise for the future. So take some comfort in that. But with that said, if you lose again, if you lose 2 more times, some of that goodwill is going to erode away just a little bit. So you got to bounce back from this Georgia Tech loss, and I think that they can and they will.
Love it as always. Alex Donno here with us today's episode. Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button only on the CanesWear Daily Podcast on FTSN. Alex, let the people know where they can find your amazing work. I know many already know, but if they don't have internet or an iPhone and just are cavemen at this point and just don't follow Miami media, you're at the top of the list. But let the fans and remind them where they can find your amazing stuff at.
Well, for any of the cavemen out there, shout out. I appreciate how you haven't adopted all this new technology. But for everyone else who's got, smartphones and computers, you can find, I do a show every single day called Locked on Canes, where we talk about on the field stuff, a little recruiting, more recruiting this week, because Miami just landed a big one in Hayden Lowe. We talked a lot about it for the past day. We put out at least an episode per day. Sometimes if breaking news happens, we'll put out a second episode. So you can find Locked on Canes on YouTube. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Make sure you also follow the show on X at Locked on Canes. And if you follow us, we'll follow you back.
Love it as always. Alex Donno, Brad Tejeda. Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, go Canes.